So, yeah.
Yeah. So just as a quick introduction, welcome everyone to the second seminar session here at UCL. And it's my great pleasure to introduce Antonis Papasavva, who is a PhD researcher at our group. And he works with Emiliano De Cristofaro and Enrico Mariconti, and he focuses on the characterization and detection of racism, misogyny, and other types of discrimination and extreme behavior in mainstream and non-mainstream online social networks. And today's talk will provide us with a peek into this world of online fringe communities. And with that, Antonis, the stage is yours.
Thank you very much for the introduction. So the talk I'm going to give today is about two research studies that I was working on during my first year as a PhD researcher at UCL's Department of Computer Science. Okay. So just please be advised that some of the figures or words presented in parts of this presentation may be disturbing to some audiences. And I would like to say that my university, my funding body, my research group, and myself do not espouse the ideas of these symbols or words, but we just present them here just for the sake of research purposes. So the first part of this talk is about a dataset paper that my research group and I published in ICWSM this year. And this paper presents and publishes 3.5 years worth of posts from 4chan's politically incorrect board. So let's start with what is 4chan. So 4chan is an image board where anonymous users get together to discuss different topics of interest. Users can create a thread by posting an image and a message to a board, and then others can then post in the thread with a message, image, or both. So this is just a standard example of how a 4chan poll thread looks like. The threads in 4chan are ephemeral in 4chan poll. Each board has a limited number of active threads called the catalog. When a new thread is created, it will appear at the top of this catalog. And at the same time, the thread with the least recent post, the one at the end of the catalog, is permanently deleted after it's being archived for 7 days. So the platform is the creator of original content that is considered today to be mainstream internet culture. For example, the discourse of 4chan's politically incorrect board is characterized by an original slang language and is also the creator of original memes like lolcats and advice animals. The users of the board also created the God Emperor Trump meme and rebranded the Pepe the Frog meme as a hate symbol. In addition, many conspiracy theories originate in the platform, including the QAnon movement that focuses on Donald Trump's administration, which we will discuss further on the second part of this talk. Also, Pizzagate originates on this board, which is based on leaked emails from Hillary Clinton's campaign. Previous research on the platform demonstrated that 4chan users disseminate fake news and conduct organized hate raids to internet users and other platforms like YouTube. Alarmingly, the platform is directly linked to various real-world violent events, including the radicalization of users who committed mass shootings. So our dataset is released as a single new line delimited JSON file. You can it's publicly available open access in Zenodo. The dataset includes data collected between June 2016 and November 2019. The dataset includes approximately 3.4 million threads from 4chan poll and over 134 million posts. Importantly, we augment each post in our dataset using Google's Perspective API to show how toxic the post is. So in our dataset, each post has the Google's Perspective API score based on how toxic, inflammatory, etc. it is. I'll discuss about this further. In addition, each post is labeled with a named entity that is mentioned in the body of the post using Python's spacey library. A named entity might be an organization, a real person, a location, number, and so on. Now I'm going to briefly mention some of the findings that we got from the statistical general characterization of our dataset, just for the people that are interested in this dataset to know what to expect. So in this figure, we plot the number of threads and posts per day in poll. And overall, we find that there are over 2.8 and 112,000 threads and posts, respectively, posted every day on the board. We also observe some peaks in posting activity during the 2016 US election, and then we have other peaks in activity during that correlate in similar days with important decisions of Donald Trump. So next, we look at the geolocation of every post. Just a quick tip. The politically incorrect board is one of the few that allows people to display the geolocation of the IP from which the post originates from. Please note that this can be manipulated using VPN, etc. So, for example, the user posted this post from the US. This is the default geolocation that captures the IP automatically. But also, Paul allows its users to choose a troll flag instead of posting with their IP geolocation flag. For example, the user in this post chose the Nazi troll flag to make his post. So using the geolocation data, we found that when it comes to pure sheer volume of posting new threads and posts, US, Canada, and the UK lead posts and threads created in the board. And when it comes to the troll flags, we see that Nazi has the top place. But there is a problem with this figure here. It's not normalized, as the internet using population of these countries is not normalized. So to this end, we plot the choropleths of the number of threads and posts per country, but this time we present normalized data based on internet using population. So when we normalize the data, we see that actually the US is third when it comes to the thread posting activity. And there are other EU countries that have the top 5 position. Also, when it comes to posts, we see that the US doesn't even cut the top 5. Sorry. I think that is an interesting finding that many North and East European countries are being relatively active on the board. Then we also perform some content analysis on the dataset. This is just mentioned for you to know what to expect when using this dataset. First, we look at topic. We use LDA to extract the most prominent topics of discussion. Now, looking at topics frequently mentioned on poll over the years can provide a high-level reflection of the nature of discussions that takes place there. So I'm not going to bore you with the results of every year here. I'm just gonna mention quickly that our topic analysis shows that discussions in poll feature political matters, a lot of hate, misogyny, many racial slurs over the course of our dataset. Now, we also extract the named entities mentioned in the board, as we hope that this will allow the research community to study discussions around specific entities. For this, we use Python spacey library, and we see that Trump is the most popular named entity mentioned in poll. That is followed by US, Jews, America, Europe, and so on. When it comes to the top labels, we see that users tend to mention dates, numbers, people, organization, and then nationalities and religion groups. Next, we score the content of the post according to how toxic, inflammatory, profane, insultive, and spammy the text is. For this, we use Google's Perspective API, and the result of this finding come with the dataset. Now, in this figure, we plot the CDF of the toxicity and severe toxicity models of Google's Perspective API, and we observe, that there's a high percentage of posts that have toxicity and severe toxicity greater than 0.5. Specifically, it comes with 37% for toxicity and 27% for severe toxicity. We also plot the CDF for inflammatory, profane, insultive, and obscene models, and they show scores between 30 and 36% for posts that have a score greater than 0.5. When it comes to the spammy content, we only got 16% of the posts to be spam. For the posts that have, again, score 0.5 and higher. Now, we hope that this dataset can be used to further understand 4chan's role on the greater web, including fake news and meme dissemination. Moreover, using this dataset in conjunction with data from other social networks could demonstrate the similarities and differences of users of different communities. Our dataset is also a valuable resource for training algorithms in natural language processing, modeling of slang words, or detecting hate speech. Finally, we hope that the data can be used in qualitative work to present in-depth case studies of specific narratives, events, or social theories. Again, the dataset is publicly available on Zenodo. Feel free to use it, and don't hesitate to contact me if you have questions about the dataset. Now we're moving to the second part of this talk, which presents the results of a paper that is currently under review. The title is it a Q incidence? No, that is not a typo there. The paper presents the first attempt to understand and characterize the QAnon movement on Voat.co. So let's quickly jump right into it to see what exactly is QAnon. So QAnon is a conspiracy theory that originates from posts by an anonymous user, with the nickname Q. So on October 28 in 2017, the user with the nickname Q posted a thread titled "Calm Before the Storm" on 4chan poll, and he claims to be a government insider with a Q-level security clearance. Q claims in that thread that he read documents related to the struggle of power involving Donald Trump, the so-called deep state, and Hillary Clinton's pedophile rings. So the deep state is believed to be a secret network of powerful and influential people, including politicians, military officials, celebrities, and intelligence agencies even, that allegedly control policy and governments underground, while the officially elected people merely serve as puppets to the puppet masters, the deep state. Q claims to be a combatant in an ongoing war that actively participating in Donald Trump's crusade against the deep state. It's worth mentioning that Q continued dropping breadcrumbs in 4chan poll and 8chan, giving birth to a community named after his name. Q for the nickname, and Anon stands for anonymous user. So the community is devoted towards decoding these cryptic messages to figure out the intentions of the deep state and what Trump is doing to bring these people to justice. So why study this community? Is it relevant? QAnon followers grew a lot over the last years, especially via mainstream social networks like Facebook, Reddit, and Twitter. For example, QAnon followers around the world, not only in the US, but also in the UK and Germany, have staged protests for their beliefs. Also, there were at least 25 US congressional candidates that claimed that were directly linked to the QAnon movement who appeared in ballots during the 2020 presidential election. And actually, Marjorie Taylor Greene won a House seat in Georgia, and Lauren Boebert claimed the House seat in Colorado, both publicly announcing that they believe in the QAnon conspiracy theory. Previous qualitative work studied the dangers that and threats that conspiracy theories pose both to democracies and to the public. Now, I'm just going to give an example here. So let's consider the conspiracy theory about global warming. So climate change conspiracy theories can be harmful as people who believe them often deny to take environmentally friendship initiatives. And this puts in risk not only democracies, but the general public and the planet in general. Now, conspiracy theories like the QAnon and Pizzagate are dangerous when it comes to democracies for various reasons. So government officials and media often get involved in starting or promoting such conspiracy theories to benefit their political agendas and interests. For example, California City Councilwoman Pam Patterson publicly asked God to bless her city and QAnon during her farewell address. And during a recent rally for Donald Trump, the person that introduced Donald Trump used a QAnon motto, where we go one, we go all, to conclude his speech. Now, these events fuel the belief of QAnon believers that their research is actually valid. Now, regarding Pizzagate, even when it was widely debunked, it can help motivate detractors and demotivate supporters, thus potentially threatening or altering what people are going to vote and question the morality of the people that are voting for. Mainstream social networks like Reddit, Twitter, and Facebook banned QAnon-related groups and conversations from their platforms. Specifically, Reddit was the first one to ban numerous subreddits devoted to QAnon, and this started in 2018. Then it was reported by mainstream online press outlets that many Reddit users, when they left Reddit because their communities were banned, they moved to Voat. So let's see what Voat is. Voat is a news aggregator that was launched in April 2014. Areas of interest, called subverses in this case, group posts on Voat. A subverse is the same as a subreddit. Now, similar to Reddit, users are able to register new subverses on Voat on demand, but this functionality is currently inactive. So this figure here shows a standard Voat submission, a Voat thread. So number one here is the submission post. Number 2 and number 5 are direct comments on the submission, and number 3 is a child comment to 2, and number 4 is a child comment to 3, and a grandchild to comment 2. Now, when people post, when people post a new submission, they can either post a link and a description or a title and a description. In case the submitter posts a link, then the title of that source becomes the title of the submission, and it's a direct hyperlink to that source. Also, the source is shown here at B, nationalreview.com. Also, the username of the submitter is shown there, and users can upvote or downvote both the submission and the comments as shown here at D. It's worth mentioning that newcomers on Voat cannot post a new submission unless their comments get 10 net upvotes. So that is total upvotes of your comments minus the total downvotes of your comments. Also, this is a feature that this is another feature that is similar to 4chan. Each subverse has a limit of 500 active submissions at a time in 20 pages. When a user creates a new submission, the one at the end of page 19, it goes from page 0 to page 19, it falls out of the catalog. But in this case, there is no archive. So people cannot find it unless they know the direct link to that submission. The submission is still findable, but it's no one can comment on it after it's been out of the catalog. So based on all this information, we are interested to answer and we formulate 3 research questions. So what does activity in the QAnon movement on Voat looks like? And number 2, which words and topics are most prevalent for and best describe the QAnon movement on Voat? And what narratives are shared and discussed by the QAnon followers? And last, how toxic is the content on the QAnon subverses, and how does it compare to the popular subverses focus on general discussion on Voat? But for this, we needed to get our hands on some Voat data. So first, we identify some Voat subverses that are related to the QAnon movement based on what we read from some news outlets that published the name of the subreddits that Reddit banned in 2018. So we searched Voat for these names, and we actually found 17 subverses. And upon manual inspection, we confirmed that they are devoted to QAnon discussions. But 16 out of the 17 were essentially inactive. So they had less than 800 total posts over a period of almost 5 months. Therefore, we only focus on the most active QAnon subverse in our dataset, which is Great Awakening. We also collect data from 4 most active subverses as a baseline dataset, most active in terms of post activity. For the baseline dataset, we select the top 4 subverses from the top 10 most subscribed subverses. This table here shows how many posts, both submissions and comments, we collected from each subverse. And these numbers here show the number of users that we found being active in these subverses. Now, it's interesting to notice that there's a lot of overlap between the subverses here, because this is the total unique number of users that we actually collect in our dataset. So I'll very briefly explain how our Voat crawler works. First, we use Voat API, and we request Voat API to send us the detail of the subverses themselves. So this includes the subscriber count, creation date, and so on. Now, after that, based on every subverse that we have in our database, we request Voat API to give us the submission IDs, the submission data for every page from page 0 to page 19. So this includes the unique submission IDs for all the pages. Then, for every submission that we got from all the subverses in our database, we then ask Voat API for the comments for that submission. So Voat replies to our Python crawler, with a segment of comments that is 25 comments at a time. So for this, we had to develop a depth-first algorithm. So we check every comment for a child comment, just to make sure that we covered this comment segment. After that, we request for the next segment and next segment until we make sure that we covered that submission. Then we move to the next one. We repeat the same thing, and all this data is saved in our database. So based on the data we collected, we plot the number of submissions and comments per day for each subverse in our dataset. Figure A shows the number of submissions per day, and figure B here shows the number of comments per day during our 4.5 month collection period. So we see that Great Awakening is actually leading new submissions per day, with about 100 new submissions per day, while the following one is news subverse with only 70 new submissions per day. Now, this is remarkable if when compared to the number of subscribers. Great Awakening only has 20,000 subscribers, when news has 100,000 subscribers. When it comes to comment posting activity, the difference between Great Awakening and news is not too much, but news actually leads comment activity with 60 comments more per day on average compared to Great Awakening. We observe a peak in posting activity in Great Awakening on the 2nd of July with 185 submissions and almost 2,000 comments. Manual inspection of our dataset shows that this is related to Jeffrey Epstein's ex-girlfriend, Ghislaine Maxwell, being arrested by the FBI. Now, this is interesting because people in there discuss the pedophile rings and all that. So the FBI arresting Epstein's ex-girlfriend is a sign that the crusade against the pedophile ring is indeed ongoing. Also, the 7th of October this year has the most submissions on Great Awakening for a single day. That is 207 submissions. And manual inspection shows that they mostly discussed Facebook announcement about banning QAnon accounts, pages, and content from all their platforms. Next, we focus on user profile data to understand how often users post new submissions, both in Great Awakening and baseline subverses. Now, this is interesting. It's interesting to see whether the audience of Great Awakening and baseline subverses consume information from specific users due to Voat's rule, not allowing newcomers to post new submissions unless they have a comment contribution point equal or greater than 10. So we plot the figure here that shows the top 15 submitters, the top 15 commenters for both the Great Awakening subverse and the baseline subverses. All others here represent the rest of the submitters. We find that almost 14,000 submissions of Great Awakening were made by only 346 users. That is a huge difference. The 22,000 submissions of the baseline subverses were made by almost 2,000 users in the baseline subverses. So we observe also that the top submitter, user one, for the Great Awakening subverse, posted 23 almost %, that is 3,000 submissions on Great Awakening. When comparing this, so the top 15 submitters altogether are responsible for 26% of the total submissions for the baseline subverses. So we see that in Great Awakening, the audience consumes data only from specific users and in great extent from user one, but when it comes to baseline subverses, we observe that that is more evenly distributed across numerous users. Now, also, it's interesting to highlight that we also notice some overlap between the top submitters, and specifically user 8 and user 9, which are top submitters in Great Awakening, are also top submitters in the baseline subverses. And user 30 is the top commenter in both Great Awakening and the baseline communities. So then we are interested to understand when these users registered a new account on Voat. For this, we use user profile data to plot the number of registrations per month for both Great Awakening and the baseline subverses. It is evident that user registration per month in both communities are on the rise overall, but we observe some peaks during certain periods. So we searched the internet to see what happened during that period. First, in June and July 2015, we found out that Reddit banned hateful subreddits. So we see that registration peaked. Then in September 2018, Reddit banned QAnon focusing subverses. Hence, the the spike here and both in the both communities. Now, the spike here is believed to be due to Reddit banning the most popular incel subreddit. So this result, although our dataset is not representative of Voat's user base as a whole, it provides an indication of the dates that users decided to join the platform. Overall, we confirm that Voat received a high volume of new user registrations when close to the dates that Reddit banned some subreddits. Now we move on to answer our research question 2, which is which words and topics are most prevalent for and best describe the QAnon movement on Voat. For this, we use LDA again, and we find out that in Great Awakening, the discussions tend to be mostly about US presidential elections based on keywords like Trump, elect, Biden, and vote. We find these keywords across numerous topics. Then we find a topic that we believe is focused on COVID-19 due to words like COVID, mask, test, and vaccine. Then we find another topic based on Black Lives Matters. This is based on some racial associated words like black, white, and matter. And we also found a mention of a racial slur in this topic. Now, when we did this analysis for our baseline subverses, we again found the same topics pretty much, but this time we observed that Black Lives Matter topic had way more controversial and racial slurs and hateful words. So then we move on to the named entities. So topic modeling gives us an idea of what is being discussed, but we are interested of who is being discussed in these subverses. So to this end, again, using Python's Spacey library, we plot the top 10 most popular named entities and entity labels mentioned in Great Awakening. We see that Great Awakening is obsessed with Trump, US, elections, America, China. This might be due to COVID here, American, and interestingly, FBI. Now, this is an indication that indeed people discuss organizations, since it also comes as a first, the most popular entity label. They discuss people, locations, and nationalities. Then for the baseline subverses, we see that yes, politics are also apparent there, Trump, US, America, and so on, but we find a lot of mentions of nationalities and religious groups. In the baseline subverse, organization, people, and nationalities are the top 3, when nationalities and religious groups are only 6th for the Great Awakening subverse. Then we move on to the second part of our research question 2, which is what narratives are shared and discussed by QAnon followers. For this, we use word2vec model, which generates word representations as embedded vectors in a multidimensional space. Words that are used in a similar context, that is, tend to have similar vectors in the generated multidimensional vector space. After training our word2vec model only using Great Awakening data this time, we find that the top 10 most similar words to the terms QAnon and Q. Q here represents the Q user, QAnon. So we see that QAnon is associated with conspiracy theories, the movement itself, followers, some tweets, and so on. But when it comes to Q, we see again drops here represent the messages that Q drops on 4chan and 8kun, that they call them Q drops. We find words like cryptic messages, psychological operations, that the government is supposedly doing to control people, and so on. But we were interested about this keyword here, LARP. I'm gonna mention this in the next slides. So to better understand the links between the different words in our vector space, we use graph representations for better visualization. In other words, we transform the embeddings into a big graph where nodes are the words and the edges are weighted by the cosine similarity between the two nodes. So we perform also a community detection on the resulting graph to understand the high-level topics that these words group together. And for this, we plot the two-hop ego network. So we only go 2 hops far, not further, starting from certain words. For visualization purposes, we remove edges that have cosine similarity less than 0.6. And this is what we came up with. This is the ego network that starts from QAnon. So we see QAnon there. Now we observe that the QAnon community, the blue community, is very close to the purple community, which seems to be discussing the movement itself. Now we understand this based on words like QAnons, movement, believers, and so on. At the same time, the blue community seems to be discussing details about the conspiracy theory. We understand this about based on the psychological operations keyword here, cabal, manipulation, and disinformation, and so on. Next, the yellow community is focused on the posts that the Q user posts on 4chan and 8kun. They are also mentioned as Q drops, as I mentioned before. So we have the Q user there, and we see that he is directly associated with the word LARP there. That stands for live action role playing. I'm gonna get into that in the next slide. We also have words like timeline, Q drops, cryptic messages, decode, and so on. Now, in the green community, we come across the QAnon predecessor, Pizzagate. And we also find some Q drop aggregator sites, which are sites that collect the messages that Q drops in 4chan and 8kun. That is QMap, 8kun, 4chan is there, and then we find some social networks like Twitter and Instagram. Now, we were interested to understand the narratives around the Q user himself. So we plot the two-hop ego network around the contriver of the conspiracy. So we find words like disinformation, doubts, the word LARP, live action role playing, which gives the impression that Q is actually just a troll playing a game. And we also come across the word shill, which means is a term used for someone that might be hired by the government pretending to agree on a conspiracy theory. We also find words like AG, it's a slang, and followers. Now, AG stands for the perfect man, like a very good man, a supportive man, and so on. So this plot strengthens our hypothesis that although the community is devoted to the QAnon movement, at the same time, there might be signs of chasm with regards to what the users on Great Awakening think about Q. So some people think about Q as the perfect man, AJ, and some other people mention, we have words as LARP, live action role playing, and chill directly linked to Q. Last, we try to address the last research question, which is how toxic is the content posted on QAnon subverses, and how does it compare to popular subverses focusing on general discussions? To this end, we use, again, Google's Perspective API to calculate how toxic, obscene, insultive, and so on. We use 6 models for this: toxic, severe toxicity, obscene, insultive, profane, and inflammatory. Q here represents Great Awakening, and B here represents the baseline subverses of our dataset. Interestingly, the baseline subverses in figure A exhibit higher levels of toxicity and severe toxicity compared to Great Awakening. Specifically, the 40% of the posts of the baseline subverses have toxicity score greater than 0.5, but the same model for the same amount of scores with 0.5 only comes to 23% for Great Awakening. We observe similar trends for all the models, pretty much, with the baseline subverses always scoring higher in perspective score compared to Great Awakening. Overall, for all 6 models, the percentage of the Q posts that have perspective score greater than 0.5 is always at least 10% smaller than the general discussion posts, and this applies to all our models. We believe that this is not very surprising, as the community seems to be more focused on the conspiracy aspect of world happenings, politics, and the President Trump, while racist or hateful agendas might be more focused, might characterize Voat as a whole, or at least the popular general subverses that we collected in our dataset. In other words, toxicity in the discussions seems to be targeted for Great Awakening, seems to be targeted towards the so-called deep state, puppet masters, and the pedophile ring members. But when it comes to the baseline subverses, hate and racial slurs might be used between 2 users that have contradictory opinions or approach a topic that they don't agree on. Now, if we compare the results that we found in this study to the results that we found in our 4chan poll study, we find that the baseline subverses, not the Great Awakening subverse, but the baseline subverses actually have perspective scores very similar to 4chan's politically incorrect board. So bear in mind that 4chan poll is broadly considered to be a highly toxic place full with controversial toxic content. And based on our analysis that we present evidence that Voat's most popular subverses in terms of posting activity tend to be as toxic and controversial as 4chan's politically incorrect board. And this is how we also address our research question 3. Now, thank you very much for your time. I will be happy to hear and address any questions that you might have. And I would also love to hear some feedback if you have any.
Okay, yeah, thanks a lot, Antonis. This was great. Before we move to the Q&A session, let me stop the recording. 1 second.